my office manager / runner of everything. She called me. She said, Dr. Bachman, she said, I just had 6 new patients call today for you to want to schedule. And all of them said no as soon as they found out you were cash. I was like, no, that was my nightmare. That was the thing I was afraid was going to happen. So What did I do? I went to the forum for you and all the wealth of information. I said, Jared, what do I do? And you recommended I say a few things. And it's just slightly changing the wording a little bit of what she said. I sent her a link to a podcast where you were talking about this exact thing. And she listened to the whole thing. God bless her. It was a lengthy one. And she changed her script. And the next day, she was like, yeah, 3 out of 4 signing.
Hello, and welcome to the Cash-Based Practice Podcast, a production of drjaredcarter.com, aimed at giving physical therapists and other healthcare practice owners the information needed for success in the private pay business model. And now, here's your host, Jared Carter.
Hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining me, as always. So this episode is one that was just such a joy to record, and it's an interview with Dan Bachman of Austin Spine and Sport. So he's a friend and colleague here in my own town. We've known each other, have shared patients, and referred back and forth a bit through the years. And then he began working with me in my mastermind group last year, kind of mid-pandemic, when he finally kind of realized he had to pull the trigger and drop insurance contracts and fully transition out of network. And so today you get to hear the story of that process leading up to it, the logistics and strategies that made it a success, and it has been a success. I mean, he is more than doubled his profit per patient visit, way more than doubled, stayed completely busy, and did it all in the middle of a pandemic. And so it's such a great story. It was a joy to kind of recount and get some more details that I didn't even know about. And I think there's just a ton of actionable things for anyone who, even those who are just going to start from scratch in cash pay or, are thinking about going that route, but especially those who have an insurance-based practice or have insurance contracts that are squeezing them and making it, minimal profit on a per visit basis. You're going to get a lot out of this, both inspiration as well as really actionable details and things to do and consider. Okay. Without further ado, here is Dan Bachman of Austin Spine and Sport. Dan, welcome. So good to have you on the podcast here. It was really fun after years of hearing your name and even sending you some patients and having a few patients in common, to have you in the mastermind group and help you to make that transition out of network. And now we get to share your story here. So welcome, and thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thanks, Jared. It's great to be here, man. Yeah, we've shared patients back and forth and talked over the years. I've followed you for years. So yeah, when we finally ended up working together, it was like we'd known each other forever. But yeah, even though we hadn't met.
Exactly. Yeah, and still not in person, but yet, it feels that way. I Zoom so much online interaction. I feel like it's like, certainly I've met that person in person. And then I really think about it, I'm like, shit, I haven't, we've never been in the same room. So anyways, welcome again. And for those who don't know your background, why don't you tell us how you got, what kind of brought you into chiropractic and then private practice, and we'll kind of come up to that point where you made the big transition in the last year out of network.
Absolutely. So I'm a chiropractor. I've been in practice for 21 years, which is crazy to be able to say. But I feel like that. And we were 80-90% health insurance for years. I practiced here in Austin, just like Jared, like you do. I do pre and post surgical rehab for spine and extremities. So a little different than the typical chiropractor. Essentially, I practice like a PT. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there's some subtle differences in approaches from one therapist to another, but essentially that's how I practice. So we do everything from ACL post-op reconstruction, rehab, to labral tear repair, to just the headaches and back pain, plantar fasciitis, all that stuff. And been doing that for a long time. And one of the top-rated docs here in Austin, which is wonderful, and found that as I kind of modified my rehab protocols that I write for my practice and I use with patients, I found that we're seeing patients fewer and fewer times, which is good, because patients want to get well fast. We're releasing them faster, so we're getting better results. But I'm getting paid less and less because I'm seeing them fewer times. So, and on top of that, as many of you listeners probably are aware, insurance companies are reimbursing at lower and lower rates. At the very least, they're flat over time, even though your expenses are going up. So I just got squeezed out. I got literally squeezed out of insurance and ended up over here. But I love my job. I feel completely fortunate to have kind of fallen into this. You asked how I ended up here. Basically, when I was a high school senior, they gave us an aptitude test and a skills test. See, man, what are they good at? What do they like? And both of those tests said that I should become a chiropractor.
Wow.
And I had no idea what a chiropractor was. And so I asked my counselor, my guidance counselor, and she said, I think it's some kind of bone doctor. It's like, oh, well, doctor sounds cool, says 18-year-old me. So long story short, I took a circuitous route to get to finally getting in chiropractic school. But I did. And 21 years later, here I am, loving every minute of it. Honestly, I look forward to arriving at my clinic when I'm driving to work. And to me, that's the measure of, hey, are you in a job you like? Here's how to tell. It's how you feel when you're driving into work in the morning. And if you feel like, oh, I gotta psych myself up for this, maybe it's not the right thing, or you're not looking at it the right way. But I love my job. So
cool. Do you feel like your drive to work and the feeling you have coming in, did that change at all when you went out of network, or was that really always the case?
Yes, it did.
Did
So it was always the case, but just crank it up to 11, that feeling of looking forward to it. Oh my gosh. It's been, I can go down the list. I'm sure we're going to get there.
Sure.
The list of things that are just way, way better now than they were when I was in network.
Yeah.
It's improvements in every single category, from patients to quality of care, to how much money I make, to my quality of life, to my free time, to my stress levels. It just goes on and on.
Awesome. So we know that that's kind of the outcome. And if we back it up a little bit, I'd love to get some of the pre-transition details, just to kind of hash that out, and if it's helpful for others listening. So what would, if you don't mind, and you don't have to sync up amounts with actual names of insurance companies if you don't want to, but what kind of trends did you see and what you were actually getting paid on a per patient or per code basis, say over the last 10 years? And kind of where were you at on average when you finally said, I'm squeezed out, technically can't do this? What did that look like?
Yeah. So if we look at United Healthcare, which is, I think, the largest insurer, it's either them or Blue Cross here in Austin. So they're about 25% of all insured patients here in Austin.
Okay.
Going to be United Healthcare, probably. So say 10 years ago, they were always kind of low on the reimbursement side compared to, say, a Blue Cross or an Aetna or someone else. But we would still, for a new patient visit, probably, I'm just kind of guesstimating here, we probably get, I don't know, $150 for a new patient, somewhere in there, 125, 160, somewhere in there for a new patient. Well, then about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, they went to a capitation.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's what it's called, where they say, we don't care what you do to them, but we're only going to pay you $65.
Mm-hmm.
So new patient, $65. Well, compare that to now, which my fees for a new patient for 1 hour are $200. So 65 to 200 is a nice, 100 and something percent increase there on 25% of my patients. And I get to spend more time with them. So if I'm getting paid $65, I'm not going to do a bunch of work for free.
Mm-hmm.
No patient would expect that. So we just get to do less with them in a treatment session. So now I get to spend a lot more time, get paid more. And overall, if you want practice numbers changing, that was an example of reimbursement. But before, when I was in network, I think our best week was probably 68 patients in a week.
Okay.
So
This is just you treating patients.
correct.
And how long were your sessions before?
Well, our new patient visits were 45 minutes we set aside FaceTime, and our established patient visits were 15.
Okay.
So even though it was only 15 for the established patients, we would kind of overlap them a little bit.
Mhm.
So we'd have 15 minutes of FaceTime with a returning patient. I'd take them out to the rehab room, get them started on rehab, bring in the next patient. So they would be in the clinic longer than 15 minutes, but they would have 15 minutes of FaceTime. So 45 minutes for new patients, 15 for established. We now do an hour for new patients and 30 minutes for established patients.
Great. And do you have any other support staff right now, both either clinically or administratively?
Just administratively. So I have Sandra. She's my right hand. She's been with me forever. She works remotely, so she does all the fielding phone calls, scheduling, what little billing and collection there is. It's not much. So she may even be happier than I am about this change, because she no longer has to wait on hold with Blue Cross for 45 minutes only to get hung up on. So it's all done instantly now. So
now that's her experience now, and so certainly like excited about that. But to whatever degree you're happy to share, like leading into it, I'm really familiar with how different staff's opinions of a transition on a network can be, and how that can affect the transition. Just curious, like leading into it, as you told her, this is what we're going to do. What was she as excited then as she is now?
No.
Tell us that.
I think she would agree with me if I said she was at least a little worried about. So was I.
Yeah.
I maybe even more than she was.
Mm-hmm.
But worried, hey, can this actually work? Are we just going to lose all our patients and then he's going to have to lay me off? I'm guessing. I mean, she never said any of that. She's super professional and definitely on board with, whatever we decide to do. And she understood the situation, which is I'm making less money every year, which was literally the case. I tracked it for 3 years. Every year I'm making less money and moving higher up in the rankings of chiropractors in Austin. So I'm, around the top and getting paid some of the least. So she knew that there was something had to give. So I would guess she was probably pretty anxious, at least a little bit, about how this would work, if it would work. Are we gonna crash and burn, or are we gonna stay alive here? And all this happened through the pandemic. So you asked what kind of catalyzed this transition. So basically during the pandemic, we're mid 2021 now. So we shut down. I practiced with an MD before. So we shared a suite. We had separate practices, but in the same office space.
Mm-hmm.
And we both shut down for about 2 months during the height of the pandemic. And when we came back, we realized that she and I, Dr. Wasserberger and I, could not see our patients on the same day because there's too many people in the same room, and her patients were all high risk.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So the pandemic kind of forced this too. We had a double crunch happening because we're already making less money, and then the pandemic happened, and then it's like Dr. Wasserberger and I can only see patients on alternating days, and I was like, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we had to go our separate ways, which brought me to this clinic here, which is fantastic. But yeah, so that's kind of what catalyzed it with the move. And in the process of moving my physical location, I thought, I've been fantasizing about a cash practice for literally 6 or 7 years. Because we see the trends happening over time. It's like, oh, they pinch a little more, they reimburse a little less, they give you a little more hassle, there's more paperwork to fill out just to get the same visits you got before. It's just a slow creep of just kind of bleeding you dry. So I've been fantasizing for so long, and I said, well, hey, I'm making a big change moving the practice. why not throw another change on the pile there?
Great time to do it, right?
Yes, that's
in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes, in the middle of a pandemic seems perfect timing, right? So yeah, I just decided, what the hell, let's just fucking do it, and we did it. Day one of moving into this new location, we switched.
Mm-hmm. All right. So before we get into the details of that switch, I wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of the leading up to it, just because, when I think about what's going to be most beneficial for those who are listening to this, so many of them are right now saying, I'm in the seat he was a year ago, having, for any number of years, kind of fantasizing about switching to the cash-based model out of network because they're just bleeding me dry. So, and it turns out you end up, doing it in the middle of a move and a pandemic, which is, adds even more on top of things. So hats off for that. But leading up to that change, what were the things that you were most concerned about? And then what were the things that that made you feel like most confident that you could pull it off?
Yeah. So things most concerning were quality of care was suffering, because just like you see in any doctor's office you go to, you get 5 minutes with a doc after waiting 45 minutes beyond your scheduled appointment time. So the reason that there's no mystery why that happens. It's because docs get paid so little, they have to cram as many people in to just pay their staff and keep the doors open. Mm-hmm. So then quality of care suffers. You can't have both. You can't have 100 patients a day and deliver good care. So it was coming to the point where I had to pick a path to go down. I could either go down the route where I was like, okay, everybody just gets a little hands-on stuff and a little myofascial release, whatever, and then they go, and I just turn into a pop shop, which is I don't like that model in the chiropractic world, where you just go in, 5-minute visit and you're out. So it was a choice between continue delivering high quality care or go this other way. I chose high quality care, which means I had to get off. I had to get out of network. Mm-hmm. So you asked what led up to that. And I found I was just sprinting, literally running between patients to try to make sure I'm taking care of everyone. Well, since then, what was the second part of your question? Was
what made you think, leading up to it? What made you feel like, okay, I can do this. This is going to work, or it can work?
Honestly, dude, it was you.
Thanks.
You. Thanks. So here's what I mean. I had these visions. I just kind of assumed I was going to lose half my patients.
Okay.
Or maybe more. And I was like, I can't live on that. Crunch some numbers. Well, maybe we can. But you told me, and the reasons you gave me when we had our consult, you said, Dan, you're so established, you've got a great online reputation, which is where we get most of our patients. It's Google and Yelp. We do no advertising. So you got a great online presence. People are finding you. Lots of people are calling you already. I think you're going to kill it. And you were 100% right, my friend. 100% right. And that really put my mind at ease. I was still anxious, but I did it anyway. So that plus every big climactic, catastrophe in my life has always ended up being better on the other. I've been in a better position on the other side of it than I was before. Like I got fired from my first group practice I was at, and I was broke and in tons of debt. Then I got a better job after. And then my new employer got in tax trouble, couldn't pay me. 1 week, he said, this is your last week working for me, and let me go. That was terrifying. But my own practice grew to fill in that gap. So every single thing, big kind of scary thing that's happened has always resulted in something better after. So I've gotten to the point where I kind of look forward to the big crises happening because it's about to happen on the other side. So
yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And, I just to speak to that for those listening, it's like, I find myself saying that same thing that I said to you to a handful of people if I'm on a consult call or just, coaching call of some sort, that, yeah, I think you're going to kill it because you got this, and that going for you. but it's not always the case. So I guess I don't want, a new grad out there with zero established, online reviews, online content, no, referral sources, and just starting in an insurance-based practice to think that it's going to go quite the same. Not to say that it can't, but I also want to make sure people understand, the process and the factors to consider. The thing about it is it's unfortunately not become a question of like, if you need to do it. It's been like as you said, everyone is being forced to look at it. And when you look at the numbers and the trends, it's like, it is not going to get better when it comes to reimbursements. And it is not going to get better in terms of your your business costs. Like, your costs are going to go up, guaranteed. Reimbursements, at least, according to the last 30 plus years, are going to continue going down. The mathematics get even worse when you consider the baby boomers fully exiting the workforce and how Medicare will affect that. And, for every practice that decides to sell to one of these big conglomerate, whether hospital system or just corporate care systems, that gives the hospitals and the corporate care systems even more leverage over the insurance companies, right? And so the insurance companies have to be insured. They have to have those under contract. They have to play ball. They have to give them good rates. But they're not going to lose. They're not going to lose money. They're not going to lose profits. So what happens? Who makes up for it? It's practices like ours, right? So for anyone listening, thinking that there may be another way, I'm sorry to tell you that this is an inevitability. It's not an if, but a when. And in your geography with your contracts, it may be longer. You might have more of a runway than others. But everyone that wants to be in business 10 years from now really needs to understand that, like, their ability to eke out a profit is going to get harder and harder and harder. And so I love featuring folks like Dan, who took the leap and did it right and got a bit of advice on how to do it and killed it. So we talked about, like, your admin was like on board but scared, and so are you, and that's understandable. But you had those certain factors in place that gave you some confidence to move forward with it. And by the way, guys, I would say, if you just search for Dan in Austin on Google, I don't know that Dan, I've ever seen, whether PT, chiropractic, or really any like small healthcare practice, that had as many Google and Yelp reviews as you. And that, no doubt, has just been a huge driver of your practice success and the ability to transition out of network, no doubt.
100%.
No doubt. So
recommend for everyone.
Yeah. So before we get into like the nuts and bolts of that transition and like the conversations that you had with current patients and incoming patients and stuff like that, can you just give us a little side note kind of tutorial on how you got literally well over 100 reviews on both of those platforms?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're over 100 on Yelp and over 200 something on Google. And those are the two I recommend, by the way. They're the places most people are going to go to look for you. So I just started, and I can share this with you too. I developed a little short form email, and I set it up as a what is it called? A shortcut I run all my email through Gmail, even my professional email. And there's an option when you open a new response. Yes, canned response. Canned response, yeah. So I just wrote up a little short email, and it says something basically like, by the way, I'll send this to a patient when I release them from care. Mm-hmm. Another way to think of it is send it to them when they're their happiest, which is usually when they're getting released, right? Hey, I feel better. Mm-hmm. And it says, in the email, it says, by the way, John, great job on your recovery. You put in the hard work. I'm really pleased with your results so far. If you have a second, I have a quick favor to ask. Would you mind leaving us a rating on either Google or Yelp? It only takes about a minute to do, and it could really help other patients find us in the future. And then I put a little link there for each, and I say, but no is a perfectly acceptable answer as well. I know you're busy, and if you're not able to or whatever, that's completely fine. Regardless, Let me know if you ever have any questions in the future going forward. So that goes out. It's not completely automatically, but I just, as soon as I release someone, that goes out to them.
Just send it to them.
So you will just accumulate those. And, your ratio, I'm guessing my ratio is probably like 1 out of every 5 I send gets a review. But, you're planning on being practiced for years, so they pile up.
Yeah.
So job 1, claim your profile on Yelp and Google is my recommendation. Claim your profile so it's there, so people can go to it. And I respond to every single review. That's another thing I'd recommend too. So a lot of patients will come and tell me, I read all of your reviews. And I'm like, oh my God, that's
a lot.
Half. Like, I'm very impressed. And they said, a lot of times they'll say, I especially like, I've only got like 2 bad ones. They said, I especially liked how you replied to the people who left you bad reviews. So the fact that I did reply and I didn't get angry and I said, hey, I want to make this right to you, which is a whole other probably podcast topic, but they appreciated that. So don't let a few bad ones, scare you and think it's going to scare patients off. It's really not. In fact, they expect to see a few, otherwise they may be suspicious that it's all fake or something.
Yeah, man, that was a great little, 5-minute or less masterclass. I love it. And people can kind of re-listen and kind of adjust their own script and have that as a copy paste or a canned response. That's perfect. Thank you. Cool. So I know we're kind of getting close to when your next patient comes in here in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'd love to get into some of the details of when you made the transition. If you could just kind of talk us through the story, the process, and what you feel like really worked well. And if anything that you felt like maybe you would suggest not doing, or, any other tips about the actual transition.
So the actual transition was kind of deceptively simple.
Okay.
The biggest difference I noticed. So here's what I'll tell you we did. And I'm not recommending anyone else do this. I'm just saying what we did. I don't know what your rules are in your jurisdiction. I don't know what your contracts with your insurance companies are. With our insurance contracts, it said you can cancel anytime you want, but sometimes there's a lag, meaning I'm still in net. I cancel today, but it's like 2 or 3 months before I'm actually out of network. So I'll be technically in network for several months after I canceled. And it varied from insurance plan to insurance plan. Some of them were like, okay, you're done today. Others, it's 3 months or something. So what we did is we just made all our new patients cash. So any patients who were currently in a treatment plan during the transition, we kept, that's what they were signing up for. So we kept, billing their insurance. But after a month or 2, we kind of quickly ran out of those. And then I just told Sandra, hey, let's bring the hammer down from now on. Everything is cash, even established patients. So that actually ended up seeming pretty seamless. Didn't really have anyone complain.
Wow. Okay.
We did the one thing that's kind of gave me a cold chill was like, I think the day 2 of going to cash, Sandra, my office manager / runner of everything, she called me. She said, Dr. Bachman, she said, I just had 6 new patients call today for you to want to schedule, and all of them said no as soon as they found out you were cash. I was like, no, that was my nightmare. That was the thing I was afraid was going to happen. So What did I do? I went to the forum for you and all the wealth of information. I said, Jared, what do I do? And you recommended I say a few things, and it's just slightly changing the wording a little bit of what she said. I sent her a link to a podcast where you were talking about this exact thing, and she listened to the whole thing. God bless her. It was a lengthy one, and she changed her script, and the next day she was like, "Yeah, 3 out of 4 are signing up."
Yeah.
So it became a non-issue.
Awesome. And, my coaching of you, I think I told you, I think you know this, but in case you don't, my coaching of you through that process, some of our recorded mastermind calls, a lot of that ended up being the course content for that kind of mini course called How to Answer the Do You Take My Insurance question.
Yes.
So what I had you coach her on how to change, what she says, as well as what her goal of those calls was, right? And then when you get on the phone with them, how you need to guide those calls. The majority, like really all of that is in that course, along with some other bonus scripts and materials and stuff. And for those listening, what is the URL? drjaredcarter.com/the-question, or just the question. And it's like the big question we all worry about, whether we're already cash pay or we're transitioning out of network. And, as you guys just heard, it's really about that conversation or conversations. Sometimes it's multiple and maybe an in-person consult, but that's where the magic happens. And no doubt things have to change. You experience, like, she kept her script the same and you lost 6 out of 6. You change the script and in one day now you're, batting 750. So, and I remember you like putting in our mastermind private Facebook group. It's like the numbers just kept going up. It's like 40 new cash patients in 5 weeks or whatever, like 200 an hour. So your profit per patient just skyrocketed pretty much overnight. Yeah. And was there anything outside of that, the changes to the way she handled those phone calls and maybe the changes to your initial conversations with folks? Or I should say this, were you already getting on the phone with anyone before, or were she just booking them and then, yeah. So you added it in on my recommendation. You said, all right, Sandra, now you're getting them scheduled for a call with me. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. And then, so that I think would be a good tactic for those looking at doing this is like, look, when you're taking from someone from a 20 or 30 or whatever dollar cost per visit to 200, like, you don't do that without some changes, and right. You don't do that without holding their hand a little bit. So what Dan had to do was, add in a consultation on his own schedule, that was free to make that happen. So how did you feel, or were there any things that you could pass on that people could implement in those free phone conversations that are either cash-based already or transition out of network? Like the things that you feel like really get people saying yes and coming in at $200 an hour.
Absolutely. So I had actually forgotten that you had told me that until now, but I'm really glad we did it. We kind of modified what you told me a little bit. So basically I'll go over kind of like what made those little mini consults go smooth, and kind of how I treated them and what made them feel natural. We'll go over that now. So basically, I would set aside about 5 minutes to talk to the prospective patients. First of all, Sandra would tell any prospective new patients, Dr. Bachman likes to call all of his patients before they come in, just to get to know you a little bit and make sure that you're a good fit for what he does. And they're all like, yeah, that's fantastic. We love that. I mean, to a man and woman, they love that idea. I mean, who else does that, right? The doctor calls you before you come in. Come on. Yeah. So huge value add and set you way above the rest of everyone. And it's also, what I would do is I would do it in front of my computer and I would chart their subjective. So I would pull up their subjective and be charting. So that part was, at least half done by the time they came in. Mm-hmm. So that was a little time saver trick too. Mm-hmm. And basically you just kind of say, hey, I understand. Sandra would get a little bit of info from them. Low back pain going on for 2 weeks. Think it was caused by, and I, lifted something heavy. And then since then it's waking me up. So then I would get on the phone and I'd say, hey, Susan, this is Dr. Bachman. Sandra was telling me about your back pain. And man, it sounds like it's pretty bad. It's waking you up from sleep. And I would repeat back all those things. And let me tell you, that establishes an instant connection. When you're telling someone what they are thinking and feeling, that's a strong connection right there. And they feel like, if your doctor ever just walked into the room and said, hey, you've had this going on for this length of time, and it got a little better, then it got worse, and you saw 2 other people, and that didn't help, and then you'd like to get back into, CrossFit again. You're like, yeah, me. We're on the same page. So they're engaged with you. So that's hugely helpful for establishing a good connection. And then you just get along famously once they come in.
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing is I ended up telling Sandra just to offer that.
Just what?
Just to offer the mini consult with me to new patients, rather than saying it's something he likes to do with all his new patients.
Okay.
So since then, I'm really glad we did it back then, just to make sure we started off strong.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, Jared, man, I call maybe a patient every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You get someone.
Oh, so it's an offer, and then they say yes or no, and not many of them are saying yes. Okay.
Exactly. But I think the offer itself has to be, taken well, because what doctor offers that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just the offer itself is definitely helpful. And a few take us up on it. Usually it's a mom calling about her kid, like, hey, is it normal to have? Are you the person I should be taking him or her to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you're not getting a lot of people anymore saying yes to the consultation, but is she? I mean, so then essentially she's doing a lot of the conversions now.
She is.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It's all her, man. It's all her.
Awesome. Cool. Very good. So she's been well trained at what emotional buttons to push and how to guide those conversations now.
Honestly, the way I would describe what she does, Jared, is really she's just trying to be helpful to the patient. And she's kind of worded, her standard boilerplate that she, says over and over to each new patient. She's changed it a little, like the way she describes Dr. Bachman is out of network with all insurance companies, but we can always give you a super bill. You can submit the claim to your insurance company yourself, and you, depending on what your, kind of coverage you have, you may or may not get reimbursed there.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll say 90% of our patients have great insurance, and they still choose to come pay out of pocket with us. So, and she'll say, the reason you found us is because of his reputation. So that's why people are willing to do this.
Mm-hmm. So. Are you guys doing any, I'm just curious, are y'all doing any kind of tracking of like conversions of yeses based, per phone call of prospective patients?
We talked about it initially. I think we looked at it initially, but since then, that was last August, we made the switch. So we're almost a year out.
And you haven't seen things slow down at all? No.
We see 60 new patients a month.
Yeah. And as a solo provider, that's a lot.
And yet I only work 2 full days a week and 3 mornings.
Oh, cool. Wow.
So I have lots of free time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I put a 15-minute cushion between all patients.
Wow.
So never a rush. There's always free time. If someone's late, who cares? We got 15 minutes. I wipe down everything between. It's just luxurious.
Oh man, that's awesome. Okay, so I know you've got a patient coming in here in a few minutes. I don't want to keep you past that point.
We can always do a part 2 if you want.
Yeah, well, maybe we should, because this has been great. And you got 15 minutes. It's luxurious, so we can. No, just kidding. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts or what you'd want to pass on to anyone who's kind of already in practice, like you, feeling the squeeze. Anything that maybe we didn't cover, or just advice, words of wisdom, anything you'd like to pass on as we wrap up.
Absolutely. So getting your online presence and your online reputation established, even though it starts with 0 reviews, I'd say top of the list for any doc, any therapist. That's critical. That's where everybody's going to find you. You're still going to get referrals from person to person, family members and friends and coworkers, but definitely do that. As far as making the switch to cash, I never look back. It's scary. But what makes it easier is having someone like Jared to walk you through it and hold your hand. Let me tell you, the little things you're going to run into, which I did in the transition, like 6 patients just wanted to come see you and they all said no when you found that you have to pay cash. I might have figured out how to fix that 6 months later. Maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I'd be out of business. So use an expert, use Jared. Oh my God. Because he's been there, done that a million times. And he could say, oh yeah, just say this. And then magic happens. So he's already figured out the answers to all the questions you're going to have. And it's just right there waiting for you. So I can't emphasize enough how grateful I am for you and what you and your team have done, but highly recommend the same to anyone else who's considering this. It makes the whole process so much easier and streamlined. Also, if you don't make the change now, more than likely you're going to be forced to, like I was. So you can either do it now when you have the luxury of time. I can actually pay my bills, but in the future, things may get so tight that you just don't have that ability. So I'm really glad that I did wait 5 or 6 or 7 years, but I'm glad that I'm not still doing it, because I see all my friends who are docs and just struggling and having terrible stress. And I just feel like I'm living the life of Riley here. Right. So get ready. If you want to feel rewarded by delivering good care and being able to spend the time and make a connection with patients, if you care about how your patients do, this to me is the only way. I can't see how anyone could make a living under the major medical healthcare system we currently have in our fields. I just don't see how anyone can do it. Not that it's impossible. I just think it would be really hard and really high stress.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. And I didn't mean to extract
no.
an audio, but I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. It was really fun walking you through that process and seeing the success posts and stuff in our group and seeing how well it's gone, even in the midst of a continued pandemic and other things going on in your life. So, really well done, and hats off on executing and just taking the leap and doing it right. So I appreciate that as well. And you've got a patient coming in here any minute, so I'll let you go. Thank you again. Yeah, and hopefully we can get in a part 2 and kind of extract even more details for folks.
I'd be more than happy to, Jared. Thanks so much for all your help, you and the rest of your crew.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cash-Based Practice Podcast. If you liked what you heard here today, we have some extremely important things we want to send you. First, a quick start guide to cash-based physical therapy and Medicare. This free ebook will provide the primary rules and regulations surrounding this confusing but important topic. Secondly, we want to share with you the 5 characteristics common to all successful cash-based practices. Find out the vital things Jared has learned from years of interviewing cash practice owners and running his own successful cash practice. As one of our listeners, we want to give you all this information absolutely free. You can get it right now by going to drjaredcarter.com/success. Again, that's drjaredcarter.com/success. Go there now to get your copies, and we'll see you next time.